CCU Orlando and Aikens Counseling Center present The Authentic Spiritual Journey, a weekly show featuring real and practical spiritual conversations from diverse perspectives here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Today, episode 40, How We Love, Part 2. And now your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson, and special guest, Cassandra Aikens.
Welcome to the show. Happy Monday, everyone. I'm Cynthia Alice, and I am the host of The Authentic Spiritual Journey. And I'm here once again in 818 Studios with my very thoughtful producer.
Hey, this is Dave Croft. What is happening, everybody? And welcome to April. It's April Fool's.
Yeah, don't be no fool, brother.
I was never a fan of April Fool. I never liked pranks.
Either.
I think pranks are mean, but I do like watching the videos on YouTube.
You love appreciating other people's
pain. I
pain.
appreciate everybody, other people getting pranked and scared. I don't know. That makes me a hypocrite, but
I know that so prepares us for today's show because not really, but anyway, we're here in the studio. Not only myself and Dave, but I have the love of my life here.
Cassandra Aikens.
I made her introduce the love of my life, blank, blank, blank.
I was like, did you forget her name?
No, I was thinking the same thing.
Cassandra Lee is here. Cassandra Lee Aikens is here. She is one of our sponsors and has been from the beginning. What a gift that is to me and to all of you, because it makes sure that this show goes on the air. So that is really wonderful. So she's one of our sponsors, but also my partner in life. And we just have a great time together. And so we just decided to continue the conversation.
Yeah. Last week we really didn't quite finish up what we needed, so we had her back, and we're going to continue. This is part 2 of How We Love.
How We Love. I forgot to say the show title, right?
I got your back.
How We Love. So welcome back, Cassandra.
Thank you for having me. I really love doing these shows. It's fun.
Yeah, it is. I still think we should do a dream show. I want to say to everybody, raise your hand if you want Cassandra to do a dream show.
But keep one hand on the wheel.
Yeah, keep one hand on the wheel. Okay, so far there's 3 going up in here. So I think dreams are so cool. Anyway, what I wanted to say the last show that I never got to about dreams that's so cool is that they tell us so much about our lives here and now, but without a really proper guide, we could be really confused. And so it's so important if you're doing dream work to get some support, in what you're going through, because it's a wonderful tool. It's weird to call dreams a tool, but hopefully it's making sense. A wonderful tool to know your soul.
Yeah, it is a tool. It's one of the things that we can use on our journey.
Yeah, and that's exactly what the show's about, friends. We are always about the authentic spiritual journey, which means we're sharing, we're learning from one another in real time, right here and now. I had a moment the last show where I about burst out crying when Dave was relating a story. And so this is good because this is how we grow, this is how we mature, this is how we see more of ourselves. And as we started the last show, we talked about how we love. And I started that show saying something like, it seems like the world's gone crazy, and yet we say all you need is love, all I want is love. We know we need it in every aspect of our lives. And in fact, love is the uniting force of the universe. So how do we do it? How do we do it better? And so who better to do the show with than my partner in life? Because we are always working, not in a bad way, but always working on ourselves. And in turn, that blesses the relationship.
Do you remember that corny little saying that everybody's heard it? You can't really love somebody until you love yourself.
It's a true statement, ain't it?
It's true.
It's true.
It's so true.
Say more about that.
Well, I just think if you look at what's going on in our current political world and our, just the energy of hatred that's being, that's so big right now.
Right.
There's so many things I could say that are going on in the universe right now, but of course everybody knows what that is. But if there were more conscious people,
yes,
that loved themselves, they would not treat other people so poorly, so badly.
Yes, and again, that's what we hit last week, and I want to bring it up again because it is a foreign concept to some of us in terms of these words, that our source of love, meaning that where we learn to love from our parents, from those around us, really goes with us throughout life. It's like this invisible blueprint that guides us. And then it calls relationships into our lives. Then we tend to, if we find ourselves in situations that feel similar on some level, we can become triggered. And as we become triggered, we often shut down, we freeze, we go into attack mode on the other. And we're in fact being everything but loving, which is what we want to be.
Right. Why do we do that?
Why?
Because
Why?
we're so wounded.
Yeah, it's because our wounds are leading the way.
Our wounds are leading the way.
Yeah.
And I want to say a little bit more about that in terms of a psychological image that everybody can get. So just imagine that there is a straight line, and at the top of the line, there's a capital S, and at the bottom of the line, there's a little e. Got it? So it's a straight line with a capital S at the top and a little e at the bottom. And one of the things that the Jungians talk about is our ego-self axis. And that would be like an axis, a straight up and down. So when that axis is vertical, our ego is in service to our self. And another word for self is God within. And so if I'm doing my work, by the way, nobody has a vertical ego self axis that we know of, but we're trying to get it straighter, right? Most of us are kind of catty-wonkered like this.
Yes, professionally put, catty-wonkered.
Yeah, that's in
Catty-wonkered.
the textbook.
Yeah. So, and what that means is that the ego then, that we come to the equation of relationship with our complexes, with our wounds, our traumas, yada, 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 and all that stuff that we bring. And if we could, the more we understand ourselves and heal our little ego, the straighter the line gets, because really what it's about is knowing that the thing that runs the whole show is that God within, that capital S self.
Yes.
That's what it's all about. So if I love and am in service to my inner guidance,
Yes.
the master of me, call it whatever you want to, God within, capital S self, whatever. If I divert to that part of myself, then I'm really going to love myself, because what I'm saying is I am that.
Yes.
And if I know that I am that, then I know what I am not.
Yes. Yes.
And I won't allow anyone to lay on me what I'm not.
All right.
So if then I can lovingly hand over to the other person, you know what? This is not me. I am in alignment with my highest power, my true light, and I'm not going to engage in this at all with you. That is love. It's self-love, which really is where it has to happen first. You have to love yourself first.
And ultimately love for another, because you're not drug into some crazy drama.
Right, because then it's two catty-wonkered egos
Oh, yeah.
going at it.
And that's never going to be a good thing.
No, and
I
that's
can attest to that.
and
I've
that's a
tried
lot
it.
of our problems in our country right now.
Yeah, it is. We've got little egos running countries right now.
The problems in our country right now. It is a spiritual problem.
It is. Absolutely true.
Period.
Absolutely true. Yeah. And no awareness, actually, of self. Very little self-awareness. And lots of narcissism. And by the way, another book I'm going to recommend is called The Object of My Affection is in My Reflection. The object of my affection is in my reflection.
I haven't read that one.
That is a great book. I had a situation. It was the same time I was reading that book, The Sociopath Next Door. I can't believe I forgot to get the hero within, but I promise it'll be the in the
Carol
other show.
Pearson.
That's who it is.
Carol Pearson, the hero
I knew
within.
it was Carol somebody.
Yep.
Carol Pearson is that other book. But this one, The Object of My Affection is in My Reflection. I believe the author's last name is
Lerner.
Raquel Lerner. And boy, the reason I study things like this, really, friends, it's not for my job. It's to be a better human. Because I had been in a work situation with somebody. To be honest, I had never even heard the word narcissist when I was working with this person. But the narcissism was so intense, And I felt kind of turned upside down all the time around them, like emotionally and spiritually. They would say something and I would just be taken to my knees, like in nothing. And I was like, I don't understand it being talked to like this. I felt like everything was my fault. I was really confused. And somebody said, oh, that's narcissism. And I said, well, what's that? I was very naive when it comes to those terms, even though I was probably, I was probably 30 years old. I really didn't know the word narcissist. But boy, was that book helpful because it gave me, it listed traits of narcissism. And it was even in relationship with a narcissist, working with a narcissist, how to manage it, and say if that's your boss, and how damaging it can be. And if you don't, as you were saying, have a good sense of self around a narcissist, man, you are going to cave. And talk about freezing or not knowing what to do. That was a real tough time for me, and that book was a real lifesaver because
Yeah, we'll have a link to that in our show notes.
Yeah, because it spelled out for me what the behaviors were, and I was like, oh, so it was a real insight into some of those behaviors.
Well, I have to read the book, I guess. That sounds like a really good one.
Well, you know how to spot a narcissist, though, from a mile away.
Well, every good narcissist, somewhere in their close proximity, is a really good codependent.
Yes. Oh, yes. It have to be.
Right.
Right, because we want to do it right. We always come back to codependence.
Their sidekick or... I was making the joke about, like superheroes and sidekicks, but
Batman and Robin.
Right.
Robin.
Oh, wow, that blew my mind. Is Robin codependent?
Hey,
Is
man, I was
Batman a
Robin.
narcissist?
I was Robin at Halloween one year, just for the record.
Did you have a Batman?
Yeah, older brother. Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah, I think I'm a good Robin to your Batman.
Yeah.
Only
yeah.
you're not a narcissist.
We definitely have the height thing down.
We got the height thing down.
But
That's funny.
unpack that a little bit because we've talked about codependency.
We
here
have
on,
quite
on
a bit.
This show. Unpack that just a little bit.
Okay, let's see if I can make an attempt at this. It's so deep.
I know.
So deep. I'm going to very sloppily quote Dr. Charles Whitfield, who has a really wonderful book. It's an older book. It's called, I think it's called Codependence, and the subtitle is Healing the Human Condition. And it's Dr. Charles Whitfield. And if you want to understand narcissism and codependence and their relationship, it's like a Bible. It's really, it's packed. And so one of the things he says in there, let me see if I can remember, it's something like every narcissist has the need to have everyone show them who they are. This is a very sloppy translation, but every narcissist needs to be lifted up, and they demand it from other people, in fact, it's all about them. Right? For a narcissist, it's all about me. I never do anything wrong. If you don't believe me, just try.
Just ask me.
Just ask me, and I'll tell you.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
there's nothing wrong with me. Right. So every narcissist has that need, and every codependent has the need to give it.
Yes, exactly right.
Because the codependents, have a high need to be loved and approved of.
Again, it's back to this idea of how we love. Yes.
So think of that equation. The narcissist demands it. The codependent wants to give it. And it's an impossible situation because the narcissist never can get enough of it. And so the codependent never then feels loved or approved of.
Right.
And it's this vicious cycle.
But they're going to keep pouring it out in the hopes that they will finally get approval and they'll get acknowledged.
Yeah. Until they don't.
Yeah, until they don't. Until they heal enough to start seeing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, countrywide. I mean, this is very true in America. I don't think I knew it, like on a mind level until, like I said, probably in my 30s. But Americans in general all have a real healthy dose of narcissism, and it's because it's all about, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps,
And American exceptionalism and
all of that. Yes, all of that. And, as a youngster, I traveled, well, it's in Europe too, but different. But when I was a teenager being in Brazil, I really got a completely different idea about community, about one's role within family, and such as that. So, and then some of the native teachings I've experienced as well. So, in America in general, though, there's quite a lot of narcissism just in our culture in general. I mean, I don't think probably there's any American who could say, no, I'm not some form of narcissist, because it's all about us and what we want. And we don't care if it harms the environment. If we want to do it, we do it. We don't care if, it costs a lot of money. Well, we've got the money, so what the heck? What the hell? We just spend it. No problem. That's a real narcissistic viewpoint. So in reading that book, not to harp on that, but that was also telling, I saw some of my own narcissism. I don't want to sound like, oh yes, I read about narcissists and aren't they bad? We all, again, that's a great projection and shadow piece too for me, that I grew up in America and I have a healthy dose of narcissism too. We all do. So again, this is part of the healing work that needs to be done.
Yeah, it's on that continuum, right?
It is.
We all need to have a healthy dose of narcissism. There's nothing wrong with that. It's when we're on the really far end of that
Correct.
continuum that we get in trouble. And it creates, going back to the topic of this show, for codependence, I really feel that a codependent person is somebody that has needy love.
Yes. Well, a codependent really need is, if someone needs them, that is love.
That is love, but it's not love.
But it's not love. In other words, that's their source of love told them being needed is what it means to love. Yeah, but ultimately, right, that's not true.
So we could even stretch it and say there's a good group of people in this country and the world that are codependent. Because it comes from wounding of not really knowing who we are. We're not living from our authentic self. We're living from a false self that believes we're not lovable. So we do everything to feel that love.
Right.
It's
We'll do
so
anything.
needy. I'm so needy. I've got to do it.
Very true.
Never works.
Right. It never works. And I think we're all learning healthier ways to be, and some of the spiritual principles that we teach in terms of grace, in terms of love, in terms of, looking at our own pieces rather than just blaming everybody around us for where we find ourselves. But there's also ways that we can learn how to love in a more healthy way. And I want to talk just a little bit about that now, and then we'll probably finish more of this up at the break. But another book. We're talking about a lot of books the last couple weeks, but we love to read. We can't help it.
You should see our bookshelves.
Our house is ridiculous.
I have. You guys have a full-on library in your house.
I know. I want one of those ladders on wheels that goes back and forth on that.
And when we moved into that house, we got rid of 14 boxes of books.
Yeah,
I don't know if you remember that.
Jeez.
14 boxes.
Yeah, well, I did, again, recently. I'm not going to say who most of those belong to, but anyway.
Guilty as charged.
But I use them all the time. Thank God you have them, babe. So a book, and I did a series on this a few years ago, The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. And it's very funny because we had a psychologist friend in town, and I was doing the series, and she goes, I don't believe that mumbo jumbo of the five love languages. I said, oh yeah, well, let's take the inventory. So I did the inventory. She wouldn't even mark it. I marked all the inventory for her. I said, oh, okay. So basically, you're okay if you see your husband about every 6 months. And she goes, that's exactly right. And I said, well, it must be something to this mumbo jumbo then. and so the idea, and again, Gary Chapman's book was a great book, that there are just 5 basic ways that we like to receive love. And what's funny about it is at our house, we always joke that we're all of them. I don't know what this psychologist might say about
no,
that.
I like to have all of the love languages applied to me.
Applied to you. Well, the idea is that if we're loving, like I've been talking about, from our source of love, which is typically an unhealthy way to love that we think of as love. So if I'm loving my partner a certain way and it's not a way that she receives love, she doesn't feel loved, right? So the 5 basic types of love languages are quality time, acts of service, receiving gifts, affirmation, and physical touch. And it was really funny recently because we were training our dog. You remember when we had our trainer over? And we said, good boy, good boy. And she said, your dog really likes to hear good boy. And we said, we all do. We all like words of affirmation in this house. So it's funny that learning, like caring enough to take the time to find out how the people you love like to receive love really makes a difference in the ease and grace and the flow of love in your household.
Yeah, and we have found it a way to understand, like when something might happen, and we can get into this after the break.
Yeah,
is if something happens and you're like, why is this behavior happening? I'm trying not to say the thing because we're going to talk about it. Tell you what, let's go ahead and take a break,
right?
And then we'll come back and I'll share what I'm dancing around right now.
That's right. So stay tuned. You don't want to miss the rest of this story.
It's so good.
We'll return to the program in just a few moments, but first, we wanted to give a special word of thanks to our podcast partner, CCU Orlando, who has helped make this episode of the Authentic Spiritual Journey possible. CCU Orlando is a welcoming community dedicated to transforming lives, celebrating diversity, and supporting soul growth. Christ Church Unity is located at 771 Holden Avenue in Orlando, Florida, with Sunday services at 9 and 11 a.m. You can stream services live online as well as learn more at christchurchunity.net. We'd also like to extend our thanks to our podcast partner, Aikens Counseling Center. Cassandra Aikens is a licensed mental health counselor dedicated to creating sacred space where clients can explore their own inner process in a safe, non-judgmental, and supportive environment. She works with individuals, couples, and groups who are seeking to live a more authentic life. Aikens Counseling Center is located in Winter Park, Florida, and can be found on the web at CassandraAikens.com. And now we return you to this week's episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey.
So welcome back. We're glad you're joining us. We're going to just flip it over to Dave here, and he's going to finish his story.
Yeah, I've talked about Larry and Judy, Shannon's folks, coming in and moving with us and having kind of a multi-generational household. We've talked about that on the show before. And understanding specifically like how Judy, how her,
Yes.
what her love language is, and it's really acts of service.
Yes.
You know? And so understanding that not only that's how she gives love,
Yes.
but how she receives love. So as much as we can say thank you, as much as we can say we love you, as much as we can, have gifts and all of these other
That's right.
forms of love, something as simple as emptying the dishwasher goes a huge
Yep.
distance
Yep.
to demonstrating love. And so when they first moved in and we were kind of, working out the kinks in the relationship, she would get really upset and not just like angry, like, "Meh," but she would, I think, feel hurt.
Right.
Because
Right.
if the dishwasher went unemptied, and then this is just, the dishwasher represents anything really.
Right,
but
right.
if the dishwasher went unemptied, then that must mean that they don't love me.
That's right.
And which is, of course, not at all true.
Right. Absolutely.
But because that's her love language and the way she receives love,
Mm-hmm.
in the absence of that, she substituted her worst fears.
Yes.
And so that was a real growth. And now I understand that when she's doing something for us, such as making dinner or something,
Oh, yeah,
because she speaks service and she receives service.
Yes.
And that's been really good to understand. Now, obviously, like you said, I don't think anybody is one thing, and I think it's healthy to have multiple love languages kind of all wrapped up. But I know that there's one for me. Like for me, it's physical touch as a love language, to the point where I was at a gig one time and the singer, just during a gig, little jazz gig, and she came, and she was being all sultry and sexy and everything. And I involuntarily, in the middle of a live performance, like she came up and like was rubbing my head and stuff, just being goofy, right?
Just being goofy,
like
yeah.
cabaret kind of
Yeah.
thing. I instinctively recoiled from her because that's one of my love languages. And I talked to her after it. I'm like, I'm really sorry that this happened. It was involuntary, but you're speaking a love language to me that only Shannon gets to speak to me.
Beautiful.
Great boundary.
And
That is a great boundary.
And so when she did it, it just it felt not unfaithful, but it was on that spectrum. You know,
bet.
like I don't want that type of, I don't want that from you because only Shannon gets that.
I'm glad for everybody to hear that story. That's
Me
a great
too.
boundary.
Well, it's a good boundary for you, Dave, and a lack of a boundary for her, even though she was just performing and doing her show.
Yeah, and it was so normal in the whole theater kind of way.
That is.
Yeah.
And she apologized profusely, and now we kind of joke about it, you know, because like she'll go up and do it to some of the other guys in the band that they don't care because that's not necessarily their love language.
Yeah, it doesn't really mean anything. Exactly.
Right.
Well, and you said something too, several really important things. And one was we usually, or every case I know of, that we give love the way we want to receive love. So it's just like a love language. So if I do a lot for my partner, you know, which I do like doing things for her, then that's the way I like to receive as well. Just FYI, just for future reference.
So we did this test, right? Because I never read the book, but I did the test. So what did the book say my love language is? I
don't
never can remember. Because I think they're all like, you can give me gifts. I love that. You can touch me. I love that.
I think
You can do acts of service. Oh, I love that. So hot. I mean, what are the other two? I'm sure.
see, psychologists, I don't know.
You're blushing, Garcia.
I think
It's a good thing this video's in black and white.
well, I think what's so funny is that she's a therapist too, and I think it's so funny. So often therapists and your friend I said, so I forgot the rest of it. I said, so then you don't care if you see your husband every 6 months, but you're thrilled when he chops the wood and does stuff for you. She goes, exactly. I said, so that's your love language, acts of service. No, you didn't want to take the inventory, so I don't think you took it.
I know I took it. I thought I did, but I think I just thought it was pop psychology and a bunch of
Did you think it was mumbo jumbo as well?
yeah.
That's all right.
Well, we try to have some diverse perspectives.
Yeah, these are
on
diverse perspectives here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel.
But not so, because you know, if I'm receiving an act of service, I totally feel loved. But I also, I mean, what's so interesting about all of this with how we started, ultimately, if I'm self-aware enough, I can know that if Cassandra is spending time with me, she's doing so because she loves me, even if it's not my primary love language. You know, that there comes a time in your personal self-awareness that, you know, okay, well, this person loves me because, well, they're with me, number one. You know, number two, we're committed. So that means something. So, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So when you do love yourself, when you do know yourself, even though you do like to receive love a certain way, there's a maturity on the, you know, on the journey with this stuff. And I think it just deepens as you go. And I think maybe a little age too helps.
And they're not mutually exclusive.
No, everybody has all of them.
Right, but
ultimately,
I'm living proof. Like Shannon is like gifts. Don't they absolutely at all. That doesn't matter. We don't really make a big deal about like Christmas. I mean, we make a big deal about Christmas, but we don't do a bunch of gifts there. And for Valentine's Day, we don't do anything. And if I got her like a box of chocolates or something, or a ring or jewelry, she would appreciate it. Mm-hmm. But I guarantee you, if I just hung out with her, just laying next to her in bed, watching a movie, that would go so much further to her feeling loved than any flowers or balloons or anything that I could bring.
Mm. Well, and you know, and when we think about it, you know, the people we love, why wouldn't we want to do what they like?
Exactly.
I mean, it's like, why wouldn't we want to know what they're
That's why you love those little things I got you last night. That little black pouch.
Yes,
Because
I
that
was trying.
was that an act of service?
Well, it kind of was
Yeah.
because you went out of your way to do it.
And it was a gift.
And it was also a gift.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the service aspect more, that you thought about it and then you did it and then you were excited to give it to me.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yeah, and I think it translates to other relationships as well.
Oh, for
Like I
sure.
know for you, time is one of those things.
Oh, time is definitely.
And so we could have emails and stuff back and forth, but just sitting in this room right now is going to resonate a lot more as far as
Yeah.
our relationship, be it professional or whatever.
Right.
It will root our relationship a lot more than if you brought me even more cookies.
Well, I'd love to never see another email for the rest of my life. That's just truth. But yeah, oh, absolutely. Time is one of my top, and they are kind of tiered for me. I think those two kind of are interchangeable. The quality time and acts of service are both really, really important to me. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And why would you not want to do the thing that people that you work with or you spend time with? Why wouldn't you want to do the thing that helps them
and
feel
just
loved?
like we talked about the personality types last show,
Yeah.
these aren't all just you're only this thing.
Right.
It's just a way to understand some behavior. And I could understand like someone who is trained in this could see something like pop psychology, but I'm not a psychologist, and so it's like
Yeah.
they could say it on a level I could understand. You know, I feel like Forrest Gump to your Einstein over here.
Well, apparently it has a lot of meaning for a lot of folks because wasn't it a bestseller? And
It has a lot of meaning.
help people understand.
I mean, it sold
so
over 1 million copies.
it's all
so-
good. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and again, we want to get to the point, friends, where we're living from love. Mm-hmm. And we want to understand love, how to love one another better. And ultimately, for me, we've talked about several books. Ultimately, it comes down to the soul journey, the authentic spiritual journey. That's what this is all about, where we know ourselves, where we do the therapeutic work, where we, extend ourselves. And even the books we mentioned, even the last one with the love languages, the Enneagram, all those things we've talked about, all of those are ways to shine a light a little bit on where we might be coming from, where others might be. That helps give us insight and compassion, right? Well, that opens our heart, and that's where all the love is. So all these are simply tools to support the work we're already doing. They're not the only thing to do, but they are, supportive of the work that we're already doing.
Yeah. I want to say something about love. So we talked earlier about how most of us don't really have good models for that.
Right.
And one of the things that I remember being so shocked about when I learned about it, I had a mentor who said, have you ever experienced, like, after you're with your partner or whatever, and you have this wonderful time together, maybe you go to dinner and you're really intimate and close, and maybe you make mad, passionate love, and everything is perfect. And then the next day you have like a knockdown, drag-out fight, and you think, what happened?
What the heck?
What happened?
I totally know that dynamic.
Yeah. And one of the things he said was, it's because we have an unconscious fear that if we can have that much love, we can lose that much love.
So we push it away, or
Or we have a fear about it unconsciously,
see.
like, yeah, I could lose this, and what would that mean if I did? Mm-hmm. An interesting thing to ponder.
Yeah. So if you have a real intimate moment, beware.
Yeah. Well, and just know that what might be trying to come up is fear of loss of love.
Yes. Well, I think it's true. When we're loved very deeply, sometimes it is scary because we walk around kind of, I don't know, I'm picturing this kind of disheveled, perspective of love. And then when we experience some really like conscious or healing or holy, sacred love, that's so healing, we don't know what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be very scary, and so it's like, okay, well, what I'm used to is this over here.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't realize that we can just move more and more into the more holy, sacred love.
Yeah. Have you ever experienced that? Have you ever had a numinous moment where you knew that God and love you were?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Have you?
I have.
What was it?
I've only experienced the degree of it once. I've experienced it in varying degrees, but the utmost love that I've ever felt was when I was doing a breath work. And I was in a room that had about 40 people in it, and I was one of the facilitators. So I was not doing the breath work, I was overseeing it. And in a breathwork session, people work out their complexes and their wounds.
Oh,
and, you know,
boy.
so the room can get really active. And in this particular session, there was just so much grief. Like 40 people were just like grieving about whatever they were grieving about. And I was walking, and all of a sudden, I just had this command within myself that said, just stop. And so I stopped walking and I just took it in. And the compassion and the level of love was almost, I almost couldn't handle it. And I thought to myself, this must be what God feels like.
Yes. Wow.
This must be what love feels like to God, like so much.
So much.
And I've never duplicated that amount.
I think that's Tonglen.
Maybe.
That's
You know?
that Buddhist practice.
Where you take in the suffering and
And then you like transmute it and transcend it. I think that's what happened. I think you were a mighty
a tonglinger.
Tonglinger.
Oh, that's interesting. It's got the picture of, have you ever seen Green Mile?
Oh,
Yes.
yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah, and John Coffey and his ability was to take hurt and injury and pain and
Yes.
release it.
Yeah, that's the practice of tonglen.
Yeah.
Is when you take in that suffering from others and then transmute it and send it out. Send it back out.
But your feeling of it and the feeling experience, it sounded like it was a tremendous experience.
It was huge. And I've had close encounters that felt, you know, like I really love you. And when I think about that, it's just so big. You know, I really love Joshua. I really love my cat, Brody. You know, those were just overwhelming feelings of love, but it was nothing like what I experienced in breathwork. It was not human.
Yes. And I think that's true. There is a love, a God love that transcends any human love ever could.
Yeah.
No, nothing wrong with that.
And that's real love.
Yes, it
So
is.
we got it all wrong. It's not strawberries and champagne. That's not real love.
Even though that's fun.
That's fun. Yeah. What is it, acts of gifts or gifts of champagne and strawberry? I'm in.
Right. That's true love. And real love is that big and can hold all the grief and can hold and I think grief absolutely is contained in love, because I think we tend to separate that, like grief is somehow negative and love is somehow positive, but grief is love, in fact.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
You know, I talk a lot about the two things that come up over and over in every human being's life constantly from the beginning to the end of life will be love and grief.
Yes.
And to me, because I think about these things, that tells me those are two pretty important things
Yes.
that we should learn to get really good at. We should get
Yeah.
better at loving and better at grieving, because they're twins.
Yes.
They kind of accompany one another.
Well, and I think culturally, you know, I want to say in general, white culture, which we are a part, doesn't really know how to grieve well. I mean, I think there's no real place in our culture anymore. You know, it used to be when I was a kid that if there was a death, the grieving seemed to go on for days. And now it barely goes on for an hour. I know, because I'm a minister and I sit with people and I do the memorials, and people are so checked out with phones, with alcohol, and with drugs that the grief never really happens.
Yeah.
And so it's all, you know, coming out sideways. So I think it's a real important thing about grieving.
It's so important. And to take it back to where we started in this
Yeah.
conversation with healing our wounds,
Yeah.
if we really do the hard work around healing our traumas, healing our wounds, if we do it right, there's always going to be a certain amount of time that we have to grieve that which we have lost.
Yes.
And usually it's a sense of ourself. You know,
Oh.
how sad is it that we're not loved fully to the utmost capacity of a person to love another one. How sad is that?
Yes, I mean, I would say from my own process, the first time I cried about a loss of childhood, that was so incredibly important. Just admitting that it's like the denial was broken. Instead of saying everything was fine and all is well, and yes, I had a great family, and I do have a great family. But my God, I mean, there were just some pieces. I didn't get to have a childhood, and saying that out loud, writing about it, journaling about it, grieving it was a huge step in my healing process, and I'm still healing today.
Yeah,
there's still times where grief comes up about that.
Sure, because grief is about how we carry our sorrow in the world. If you really loved something, and if you really miss it, you're not going to get over it.
No,
You're
right.
always going to carry that feeling. We hope you always carry that feeling within you. So it's about how good you get at that, and how do you carry that sorrow in the world. Well, you can lay in the bed depressed for days on end, or years on end, or you can carry your sorrow in the world. And that, to me, is the goal.
Yeah, learning to carry that well.
Yeah.
And I think we're really at the point today where we've given you lots to think about, and that's what our desire is, to share the journey a little bit, to continue on the journey together. And we want to encourage you, friends, to not be afraid to look at the past, see what needs to be healed there, because whether you know it or not, from the past, you are being impacted today, every moment in every relationship. So those places maybe you haven't grieved, maybe you haven't healed, are really impacting your relationships today. So we want to really encourage you, whether it's therapeutic work that you need to do, in addition to your prayer and meditative work, being involved in a spiritual community, journaling where you may be in consciousness. All these things are important activities to do on the spiritual journey of the evolving soul. So we encourage you to do it. We are happy you're joining us on the journey. And just know we lift you up in our thoughts and in our prayers, and we appreciate you joining us. And we definitely thank Cassandra for joining us today in 818 Studios with Dave.
Yeah, thank you very much. And remember, any of the books or any of the resources that we talked about today, we will have links to those in our show notes. Be sure to check out the show for episode 040 for April 1st, 2019.
Blessings, friends, and we'll see you next week.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey, presented by CCU Orlando and Aikens Counseling Center here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. This channel is made possible through the continued support of our angel patrons Dove Borland, Angela Martinez, Peter Gibson, and Paul Caswell, along with our partner patrons CCU Orlando and Aikens Counseling Center. If you would like to help be a part of bringing shows like this and other programs to the channel, please consider becoming a patron. For more information, episode show notes, and details about our other programs on the channel, head over to experienceofthesoul.com. And if you enjoyed this program, you can help spread the word by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, Google Play, Stitcher, or the podcast platform of your choice. The Authentic Spiritual Journey is copyright 2019 Cynthia Alice Anderson, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.